And it is 2:02 p.m. and I'm calling this meeting of the Recreation and Open Spaces Committee to order. We do have a quorum. We have 4 of the committee members present, Mark Landsman, Matt Jaffe, Shannon Sutherland, and Jeff Wilson. Gary Stevenson is out there doing what we're all about. He's, his baseball team, their first pitch is 3:15 today. They're in the playoffs, and so go Broncos. So that's where Gary is. So if we wrap up timely fashion, that's where I'm planning to head after the meeting. So just quick round of introductions so everybody knows who's who. Let's go around this way. Michael Thomas on the CSD board and pros committee chair.
Shannon Sutherland, vice chair.
Jeff Wilson, member.
Matt Jaffe, secretary.
Riley McFarland with ARC Forestry. Thanks for having us.
David Van Lennep with ARC Forestry. Happy to be here.
Katie Conley with Friends of the Fiscal Mini Ranch Preserve.
Corinne Arcano with Green Space.
Mark Landsman, member. Jim Green, Utility Director of the district.
Matthew McElhaney, General Manager for the district.
Harry.
Harry Farmer, member of the CSD board of directors.
I write for the Cambria News, and now I'm writing for the Cambria Town.
Awesome, good to see you again.
So, anyway, and I'm a Cambria resident.
Tony Judge, Cambria resident.
Laura Swartz, Cambria Forest Committee.
Crosby, Swift, Cambria Forest.
And let's see, let's see who's on Zoom. Why am I not seeing what's on the bottom?
I got you. On Zoom, we have Mr. Don Howell, Mr. Eric Johnson with Utilities, Julie Amadei, Spencer Gordon, and Tina Dickinson.
Awesome. Okay, let's roll the chair report. Just briefly, key actions taken by the CCSD board since our April 3rd meeting. First, just a reminder, skate park is on everybody's mind. At the March 13 board meeting, the board directed the general manager to keep the skate park, at the Main Street location. At the April 10 meeting, the board approved the skate park memorandum of understanding, second amendment, addressing how the funding gap would be handled. And on April 24, the board special meeting met to look at the cost estimates and establish the target level. That is 1.343 million is the funds that need to be raised before we go out to RFP. In other news, Shannon, Mark, and I, along with several members of the community, attended a county Parks and Recreation public input session a few weeks ago. Parks and Rec is planning to upgrade the children's playground. Rough schedule going out to bid this summer, starting construction in the fall, and first swinging, I guess, sometime early next year. That's their schedule. We know about schedules, but that's the plan. So, any questions on the comments in my chair report? Anything else I can share? Then, and agenda review. Riley, we had talked about trying to kick off at 2:30. Are you flexible on that?
Totally, yeah.
Okay. All right. So it'll, somewhere thereabouts.
That sounds great, yeah.
Thanks. Ad hoc committee reports. The only active ad hoc committee is on the agenda, so nothing there. Committee member communications. Jeff?
Yeah, driving up Burton the other day from the dog park, noticed that the walkway up Burton is probably in need of a weed whack, so just wanted to bring that up. I don't know
What a
what
boy it is.
Yeah, whether the county is worth going back to the county or whether we do a little work party with pros committee and others in the community that might assist us in blowing that up again.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, good thought. Yeah, along with, yeah, that stretch going to Shamel Park, from West Village.
bad, really.
Oh, yeah, it's, you can't walk there, so
Forces you out on the street.
On the street.
probably a time for an email to Public Works.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
If not, though, it sounded like maybe they were doing it out of the kindness of their heart last year, sort of got that feeling. But if they're not gonna do it, then it seems like maybe this is the right place to bring it back for little self-volunteer type work.
That'd be awesome. Yeah,
Okay.
love
Yeah,
to
sign the
to
other
get
kid.
where in Cambria are we gonna be the third, fourth, or fifth, whatever day of the week or month.
Right.
Alright, so that may end up on the goals, we'll see. Awesome. Other committee member communications? Alright, reports, 208, reports from affiliated community groups. Schmidt, do we have Ron Roach, on Zoom?
We do not.
Okay, and, Ms. Harmon Worthen?
We do not.
Okay, so Forest Committee, all right,
It's been a really busy month for us, and we're doing what our agency or our 501c3 is supposed to be doing. We are reaching out to all different groups. It's all public meetings, and then in our meetings, we have public and all the different agencies, interested parties. So this month, we've been really reaching out, at least 2 or 3 of our directors have attended to the Octagon Farm Celebration yearly report for the San Luis Obispo Conservation people. We've had a very successful Earth Day. Thank you to Green Space. And you can see I'm highlighting each name of the committees that we've been with. Green Space, thank you very much. We had quite a few donations for our second edition lead guides. And we also had donations for some artwork that was donated by a local artist. We supported the Pollination Day, the Bee Fair, or whatever Claudia calls it, to be there, support her, interact. We have a display at the Historical Society, pictures and kinds of the forest communities about this handouts. We also participated, big one, at the fire.
Finder salad.
Yeah. That one, up at the Hearst Ranch at the barn, that was an amazing, we had 3 of our directors there. So, and then this really did not last. We also participated with the flower show and attend that, and then we train ourselves more with the Native Plant Society that attend forest committees. So connecting with a lot of different groups. Tomorrow we have Steve Ogden, one of our Southwest groups, giving a talk to the forest committee, which will probably be a little different than today is. So we're reaching out when we have Rancho Marino, different CSD directors come to our meeting. Sending our meeting, it's open to the public, it's open to encourage everybody to talk to each other.
thank you. Let's see, it brings us, for the dog park, Shelley Becker let me know she won't be here, but she did let us know that they had a successful weeding day last Sunday. I haven't followed up, but that was Mother's Day, so, they're a dedicated bunch. So, Green Space, Corinne.
Hi, thank you. So Green Space has been really busy. We are working really hard with Riley and his crew and getting prepared for our fuel reduction forest health management project in Strawberry Canyon, which as far as I'm concerned, can't start soon enough. And we're getting really close. We've made a lot of progress, and I'm thankful to the guys and to Steve Auden and Spencer for really putting a lot of effort and expediency into this So I'll have updates for you, but I think it's gonna start really soon. So I'm super stoked about that. Our education program is going really strong right now. Just did a lot of scavenger hunts through Strawberry Canyon with the elementary school. Getting those kids in the forest is so wonderful, and then follow-ups in the classroom. We are getting ready for our annual, well, we didn't do one last year, but our annual fundraiser. It's all adventures and experiences this year. I hope everybody can come. We have great vacation packages to Puerto Vallarta, an international timeshare, river rafting trip, some really curated silent auction. It's at the Jocelyn Center. I've got it on all social media. I can send out an email to everybody. $125 a person. Robbins is catering. We actually have a professional auctioneer who is awesome. Cody Dawson is coming, and so I'm really looking forward to that. And like everybody else this year, more than ever, we need your support. Thank you.
Thank you. May 30?
May 31st,
May 30.
last day of the month, Saturday.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. From my family, do we have either Keith Seidel or Suzanne Beadler? We do not. Nor Daniel. No. Okay, so that brings us to public comment on items that are not on the agenda. In the room, who's got something now?
Michael, can I have one thing?
Absolutely.
I'm so sorry. Earth Day was really wonderful again this year. Our numbers were down. There were a lot of things going on. It was like the storm that weekend, but we had great participation from our vendors and from people that came, and the forest committee was there, and we had 22 eco nonprofits participating, and it was just a beautiful day and classes. So thank you to everybody who came.
Yeah, you have multiple events. It was, hard to.
Oh, it was a firestorm that weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Kitty and I are already pre-scheduled for next year. So that the flower show and Earth Day at least won't be on the same weekend. Yeah, Easter Sunday threw a wrench in that, but we're prepared for next year.
Yeah, awesome. Mark in the calendar. All right. And are there any public comments, hands raised?
We do. We have Tina Dickinson and Dan Turner.
All right, let's hear from Tina.
Thank you, Chair Thomas. I actually had my hand raised after you were giving your chair's report, so it's related to that, and it's very quick. When you gave the dates for the skate park, March 13th, April 10, April 24, you did not mention the targeted amount for the gap, 329,000. I think that's good for the public to know, because we are working on that, getting that funding, closing that gap. So just to remind the public then how much that is, okay?
Thank you. And yeah, we're working together on that. Thank you for everything you're doing to chip away at that. Dan?
Good afternoon, everyone. Dan Turner. I'm the Executive Director of the San Luis Obispo County Fire Safe Council. And just want to advise, we're working with Dave Geyer and Fire Chief Berkey on implementing the weed abatement compliance on the Cambria CSD owned vacant lots. So that project has started. North Coast Tree Service, Tim Radecki is the contractor that was selected to do that. He's done about 40 lots so far of in excess of 100 to do. His goal is to be compliant by July 1 with all the lots in the district that we have contracted with him. So he's doing a great job, very conscientious. We're happy to have a local vendor doing the work because he knows the area very, very well. So we'll keep moving forward. He's found a couple of them that are pretty challenging. They're actually having to rappel down the side of the hill to work on. And then some that they're finding lots of interesting discarded material on the lots that we'll have to figure out a solution to move forward with as we start to uncover that stuff that's out there. next step will be to, okay, how do we deal with that? So pretty happy with the progress and look for his trucks around town. They're pretty visible. And you know, have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions? Yeah, yeah.
Hi, Dan Crosby Source. Is North Coast gonna be doing any work in the Fern Canyon Preserve?
So Fern Canyon is owned by the CSD. Right now, we're telling him not to work in Fern Canyon. We need to have a very clear scope of work and plan before we go into Fern Canyon to do any work in there. So we're not ready to work in there yet.
Thank you.
My collaboration there. Yeah, the district community is so grateful, and if you didn't catch the body language, there are some real smiles when you talked about who's doing the work, and your description helps us to understand, like, sometimes why does it cost more than just string trimmer work to clear these lots that may have not had attention for quite a while, and you're giving us clues on that regard, right?
Yeah, some of them are obviously have not been touched for years. So kind of what we're predicting is that this first year's initial treatment is going to be more extensive and expensive. And then we do have funding, fingers crossed, for a second year. So next year we think it'll be a less extensive amount of work. But that's our goal right now, is to do 2 years worth of work in there.
Yeah, it's kind of the difference between knock down and rebuild in your bathroom versus recocking the shower. It's a big difference. Yeah, Jeff.
Hey, Dan, Jeff Wilson on the parcels. Are you from weed abatement? Are you just talking about like the grasses, or are you talking about, I know the fire committee is going through some of this with the chief right now and definitions, and Matt knows this as well, but what is the scope of work for those? Is it just the weeds, or is it timber? Is it limbs? What else is part of scope of work for the other, say, non-Fern Canyon properties? Thank you.
Yeah, so the weed abatement ordinance is the guideline, because that's the ordinance the CSD passed. So they're obligated to comply with that. In addition to that, there are properties that require more than weed eating, just a weed eater. So there are a lot of down material, dead trees. But I would ask you to take a look at the intersection of Burton and Highway 1. That lot's very representative of what they're dealing with. So they are doing some tree trimming, lifting, up the skirts, as it were. But you'll see that they've left several granary trees in there. There's some habitat trees in there, woodpecker activities. Those are left in place. So we're following the guidelines that are issued by the Coastal Commission for Vegetation Treatment Standards in the coastal zone. So we're following those guidelines as well as the Cambria CSD weed abatement ordinance. And there is also some conditions on the property, some conservation easement conditions by the San Luis Obispo County Land Conservancy. So we've been in consultation with them, and we're fully compliant with their conditions. And we have a separate set of criteria for Fern Canyon that we're aware of. But we really want to have a very clear plan on Fern Canyon as to what we do and don't do in there, because it's a sensitive habitat. We want to make sure that we honor that. So.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Okay, let's.
Can I chime in real quick on the Fern Canyon? So that's a permit. We have an emergency permit right now, which doesn't always come as quickly just because it's an emergency permit, but with the CDFW for a clearing, and we've been working collaboratively with David on that. So there's some permitting that needs to go on there before we start going in there and cowboy around with some weed whackers and stuff. So we'll just get that dialed in first, and then we can make a strategic attack of that area. Right.
So you know who to connect with. Sure.
One time, this was last year, somebody came through, not only weed whack, but cut down oak trees and other different trees. And then they just let the bodies lay there, and they have never come to pick them up. So I'm not sure who the contractors are, but shouldn't they be picking up what they cut down?
I didn't hear that very well.
There's dunnage from the last time they trimmed there. And that would be, from my assumption, I wouldn't write a contract without having the contractor responsibility for, removal as well as cutting down, so.
So I'm not sure. Are you saying there's still vegetation left over?
In Fern Canyon?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll be working with Mr. Turner and the group.
There was oak trees that were like this big around. And then other plants, and they just cut them and then they threw them off the trail to the side. And I just didn't think that that was appropriate.
Yeah, I can't speak to it. I wasn't told anything about it, but I just know that the group that we're working with now, the contractor for the grant, we've met a couple times already. So, he has all the guidelines on what needs to be removed, and we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, so what's our path, our process to treat that area and end up with the right result? How do we get
We'll
there?
be meeting with, Dan, Mr. Radecki, Chief, myself, Jim. We'll end up having a meeting and go over basically all the guidelines for Fern Canyon. And then, we'll meet with the contractor and give them our expectations on how that's gonna be treated and cleaned up, along with Mr. Gary. And we'll have that meeting coming up shortly.
Thank you.
And we'll have to evaluate if we have to have a biologist on site. We do removal and cutting, so. There's little bit of planning there. Not too
Thanks.
much.
Yeah, a lot of energy.
Yeah, we look forward to getting this done.
Burn strawberry, yeah. Thanks so much.
And one last thing on that, may I just suggest if it's not already, if I missed something, that maybe a little bit of public, particularly I think Laura and Crosby or Forest Committee, some input into that, or at least awareness of what the plan is.
Is there an opportunity for that?
Some public awareness.
Sure, we'll bring you what the
Stakeholders.
CDFW recommends, and that's will be what we follow. And then if there's anything additionally on that we can do under those permission statutes, then we'll perform that. Right? I mean, there's certain size, like we can't cut over a 4-inch diameter, anything.
But
And
I'm
it's
just
certainly
suggesting
yeah.
that sort of the, I guess the right thing to do, for lack of better words, is to include some like really key stakeholders, and I'll use Laura and Crosby, who have a very, very key sort of perspective.
No, we'd love to have
on
collaboration, yeah.
That's fine, that's what I'm saying.
Absolutely, sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So there was an opportunity to engage the forest committee input.
Absolutely.
Once we have the plan and we have our internal meetings, we can give them an update, on our plan of attack.
Yeah,
Whether
great.
it's email or some version of that.
Wow, sweet. That's what you're asking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, facilities and resources, item 4A, leisure hearing.
You want to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been working with Dan and Tim, with all of our CCSD lots, so we've been going out and assessing those. Going through the map books and getting those all situated. From that, we've been doing the East Branch, because I am down to my 2 guys. I got equipment issues too again this year. So I'm dealing with that. East Branch, we ended up mowing late in the season, because I wanted to wait. I didn't want to do 7 trips this year. So we only did so far 1 in the center. We're planning to do it again here at the end of the month. The trails on the Fiscalini east side. So on the other side of the island there, we're only going to be doing the fire break, because due to the fact of our, sensitive habitat. It's a restoration, deal up there also. It just seems like I haven't gotten any solid information, the reason why it was mowed completely down to where it was. Because that's all part of the Fiscalini Preserve. So that's part of the reason why we're doing that this year. And then also it cuts back on the cost. So the Fiscalini Ranch, the west side, we're going to be starting, most likely next week. We also have, the fire breaks getting started, the trails getting started. And then we also have Williams Pest Management coming out and doing invasive species. Even though it's a little bit late, it's been kind of a behind the 8 ball right now. They're going to start the week of the 26th. So they're going to be out there spraying, and they're going to be posting. Everything's all legit on them. So let's see.
What's the range of their spraying?
So with the budget restraints, it turned around and ended up doing everything from the fire road all the way up to the top of the Ridge Canyon or the Ridge Trail, all the way up there. So that's going to be 99% of the expenditure is going to be going in there. Everything else down on the bottom, we're going to have to figure out what we can do at that point. 'Cause
So
there's
they won't be going below the Marine Terrace Trail.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Public bathrooms, I know the 2 current ones, Sheffield and Center, we haven't had any issues with. Those have been pretty quiet, pretty easy. The new public one, we're still waiting just for a little bit of contract work and permits. Basically be finalized through the county, have them do the inspection there. So I'm hoping within the next maybe month or so, at the latest, it's a month. I know Jim will have more closure on that one there. There has been an ongoing problem that we've had over here at the gate at Santa Rosa. Somebody's been cutting locks, but just, we ended up replacing them. So I ended up using a couple of my last ones, but we ended up switching that out. That's what I was out doing right now. We ended up doing some different styles of locks and different mechanisms on them. It's the troopers or the trash cans throughout the community. So we're actually down to the last one, which is right here in front of the vets hall. We kind of bumped it up a little bit because I knew we were coming into the weed abatement season. So we turned around and started jumping 6 a week. We were only doing 3 a week, trying to keep our normalcy of regular duties under task. But yeah, that's the last one that we have for that. That should be basically everything I think I got right now.
Awesome, thanks. Whose lock are they cutting? Is the green lock or the?
Fire department and the green lock.
That's the green lock, then
It's been replaced.
still green lock.
Yeah. Yesterday, guys, as we were clearing the bluff trail at the south end, Anthony and Patrick, your guys were out there continuing. Looks like the restraining wires, are making their way further south. Just observation. Everywhere where that little restraining area, even though a person could step over it, I haven't seen anyone off trail there. And then as soon as right there at Bird Rock, everyone's off trail. So those are working.
Yeah.
Those are working.
So, yeah, we only have roughly, not even a quarter left.
Yeah.
So basically what we're doing is turn around and doing them in stages. I know it is roughly about 28 inches up off the ground on the post. Either way, how you look at it, somebody's going to go across if they really want to. We are tightening them up and also using the aluminum clasp on them to secure them. No, it's been a real decent feedback from the community and everybody that's out there, noticing how, it's going to make a difference later on down the road. So hopefully it'll deter people from going out on the bluff out there.
Nice. Yeah, we were hoping that that visual message that says, please don't, would have an impact.
Yeah, I would like to turn around and that's something I'm gonna talk to FFRP about, going out and looking at placements of signage. Cause I know just having a post out there doesn't really, it kind of deters people, but periodically I'd like to turn around and put out a couple of different signs that, dog on leash and different things, or no dogs on that section. Cause I know there's been quite a few reports of that lately. But there's a couple things I need to work with the Friends of the Fiscalini and turn around and get it established.
Questions for David? Comments on the Zoom?
No public comment.
Thank you. On we go. Diddy, FFRP?
Thank you. I want to start by thanking David for the barriers along the bluff trail, which I think are neat looking and not too intrusive, but effective. Right, also very good to use the metal post. Really much bigger, less disruptive. And thanks for spraying the weeds.
Yeah.
I'm thinking on behalf of our volunteers.
Yeah.
So our volunteers are always out there weeding. This week they weeded the boardwalk, which involves getting down on their hands and knees with homemade tools to pull the weeds out from between boards on the boardwalk. And I challenge you to find any better volunteers than we have, or more dedicated. So they'll keep doing that. The volunteers also, the Wildflower Committee put on the Wildflower Show at the end of April, which is really a delightful experience. Again, we ended up with like almost 550 flowers, different kinds of plants, which was more than I expected. But then the bloom on the ranch is spectacular, so it's been a really good year for flowers. This Saturday, we're having a work day from 10 to noon to take out ice plant. They'll be meeting at the crossover trail towards the bluff trail, but sort of at the north end if you want to go kill some ice plant, which is very satisfying. You'll find some like-minded people out on the ranch. On the 24th, we're having a pop-up sale from 9 to 1 o'clock on the Saturday, just outside the ranch on the south entrance to the bluff trail. That is also the day that Michael's gonna be leading a display at the Heritage Day Festival, because some things we can schedule and some things we can't. It goes on the same day. We have about 700 plants currently here in Cambria growing for planting out in the fall on the ranch. 350 trees and about as many shrubs. So we're really excited about that. There's more coming. And this Saturday, we're having a dinner for the founders of the ranch. This is the 25th anniversary of the ranch. So we're holding a founders dinner at Robbins, where we've invited as many people as we can find, including Harry, who are involved at the very early stages of the ranch, or were early board members. So some of these people I know and some I've never met. So I'm really, really excited about this. We have a lot to be grateful for, and hopefully dinner will go some way towards making that up. That's the news that
Awesome. Questions for Kitty? On Zoom?
No problem.
Yeah, I'll just make one more pitch for the ice plant removal over on Saturday. It's CrossFit at its finest. It's the best workout you'll ever get, and we don't charge a thing. Yeah. Right.
should let you pay us.
Skate park, Julie's on Zoom. You got a busy calendar this week. All right, Julie?
She's unmuted.
Julie, we're here if you're at a point where you can chime in. All right, so Julie, if you can hear, but you can't reach whatever communication device, the general manager will be watching for your hand. When you raise your hand, we'll zoom you in. And so that brings us to the community park restroom. And you probably just, to prime the pump, kind of answer that question that, like, what do we tell people when they ask, well, did you guys know you're gonna need electrical power when you put it in? And, and when is it gonna be ready? Those kind of questions that we're fielding.
Yeah, power was a condition of the permit. So there's a PG&E pole inside the rodeo grounds booster station yard at FNR. No one is allowed to tie anything to PG&E's assets. So we had to drop in our own PG&E or our own PG&E approved pole and then go from the building to pole, and about 777 lineal feet of wire was pulled today. They've had some problems hooking up. We have a transformer from 240 to 120 in there that didn't come stock in the bathroom because it comes stock with their 120 hookup. So they're putting that together today. They should be done today, maybe at the latest tomorrow. We're looking to try and get a final inspection with the county in the next week or so. We're trying to expedite that and get that out there. So that way, our whole goal when we stated this months ago was to try and get that open by the end of May. So we're trying very hard to do that. And our electrician, I think we got 3 or 4 guys out there pulling wire and setting that up. So they're trying like gangbusters to get that all done and open, because that's the final piece right there. And that's what we needed for the final permit. Kind of on the OGALs and the grant side of that, because we have what, 177 coming our way. We just completed a status report and turned that in last week. So the final, for us to get our funding, released is to send them in the final approved permit and, inspection report, and then some photos, an overhead shot, and they just want to verify, that we have ADA parkway or walkway surrounding it from the park all the way in. So that's already done. If you guys noticed the big sign, we have a 4 by 6 foot sign out there that was mandatory with the grants. We had to have Prop 68 signage that was at least 2 feet by 2 feet. And then naming Gavin Newsom and all the other park and all the other Prop 68 guys. So we had a little bit of room to put CCSD there at the bottom, but that's mandatory. That's got to be there for 4 years after post inspection. So you will see that sign out there for the next 4 years and a couple months. So that's really all the bathroom there, but yeah,
Wow.
we'll look forward to putting that into use, get it up, it's fully operational, just permitted for use here in the next couple of weeks.
That's a lot of info. That's 2.5 football fields of power line. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
gotcha, okay.
yeah.
Um,
And there's 4 wires each too. And if you ever pull wire, it's number 8 wire, so it's heavy wired. It's a shoulder workout.
yeah.
Not quite as much as the ice plant workout.
I don't know, you might, yeah, you might know better. Questions, for Mr. Green? On Zoom?
No, but, it looks like everybody's ready.
Okay, and Julie's ready? Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can.
I am so sorry about the technical challenge. Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to report in on Skate Cambria. We have had a very busy last 3 weeks. Of course, on April 24th, we were given a number of $329,000. I'm happy to report in 3 weeks, we've brought that number down by $100,000. So we have had 3 successful fundraisers up until, I'm going to say, last week. What you're seeing right now actively in our community are 2 campaigns. One is the $100 challenge, which was launched last week. That challenge has already brought in $8,000, which is roughly 80 people. We have 14 people out in our community. So if you get a knock on the door, be prepared that it might be Skate Cambria telling you a little bit more about the $100 challenge. The goal is to do 1,500 people at $100 each to get us $150,000. So for those individuals who have already stepped up to the challenge, we thank you deeply for the support to the project. The other current fundraiser that's going on, of course, you're going to see right there on the new banners on the park. Cap the Gap is the message that we're sending. It's an active message. You'll see the thermometer at 1.35, which was the number that has been given by the district. You'll notice our red tape is already making its way up. So we're going to make this happen. We're going to get this across the line. We have a very exciting fundraiser to let you know about, which will be taking place on June 14th. It will be at the American Legion Vets Hall area and put on by our fire department as well as the Sons of the American Legion. The fire department will be coming out with more information, but I do have preliminary details. Again, June 14th, that's the Saturday before Father's Day, 11 to 2 p.m. All proceeds will be going to the park, and this will be a lot of fun. It's hot dogs, hamburgers, $5, games in the actual parking lot from large-scale tic-tac-toes to cornhole, and we've got our own firefighters doing a mini chili cook-off of their own to get a little competitive within the department itself. So very excited to get that fundraiser out into the public. Again, more details coming, but please mark your calendar for June 14th. And we've been out at Farmers Market. You've seen us out there on Fridays, and it's cupcakes and cookies. And on average, we're making anywhere from $400 to $600 on a Friday. We've been told by some other vendors, nonprofit vendors, that they've never seen cupcakes and cookies go for this kind of money before. So there must be something magical happening in the baking. But we're super grateful again for those that are coming by, educating themselves about the project, and obviously going home with some very expensive goodies. But it's all for a good cause. And I know Margie, because I can see her sitting out there has been out there at farmers market. So you'll see one of our friendly faces and part of the team of Skate Cambria. I also want to focus in on our graduates that are happening at Coast Union. And I'm very proud to say that one of our Skate Cambria team members, Dane, who you met at one of our board meetings, is graduating. And as he gave a scholarship acceptance speech, the first thing he said he wanted to do before he went off to Santa Cruz for UC Santa Cruz was to get this skate park built. And so I think that is an active voice coming from our students out of Coast Union High School. So that kind of gets you up to speed. Of course, you'll be hearing about 2 other fundraisers on top of the one taking place for the fire department. Again, expect that knock at your front door for the $100 challenge and watch that thermometer keep going up. I'm here to answer any questions as well.
Thank you. Questions? Yeah, Margie.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. We are just so happy about all the community support that we're getting. And it's really been fun, and being at the farmer's market, and Debbie and Matt Humphreys donated a gluten-free cookie choice this time. We're gonna have Rice Krispie treats on Friday. And so we are listening to people because they're saying, oh, we would buy some, but we can't have gluten. And so we have gluten-free option. We're really excited how wonderful people have been. And it's like every day people call and say, I have a check for you. When I got home from that graduation, I was so inspired by Dane, and I just said, yes, we need to make this happen. And lo and behold, my neighbors called and said, Margie, we have a check for you. Been over there, $5,000. This has been happening every day. People call us up. So we want to thank the community, how they've been stepping it up. And we're grateful to the fire department and all the people in this community that have been so supportive. And thank you.
Thanks. Nothing else? We move to consent agenda.
We do have public comment from Team Dickinson.
Okay, thank you. Dina.
Thank you, Chair Thomas. And I want to thank Julie, Amade, and Marjorie predecessor for their tremendous work. And it has been, for me, a joy to work with them, to help them and raise money. And people have been stopping by my house with some significant checks, or, even somebody from Oregon, a significant check last week. This is an amazing group of people who are just committed. And I have to say, I feel so inspired by them, and I'm enjoying helping them. It's a wonderful effort. So I thank all of the skate park Cambria folks and Cambria Community Council. It's just a terrific thing, and bravo, bravi, actually, because there's more than one. So thank you.
Good linguistic tip as well. Thank you. Brings us to consent agenda. Any changes we need on the April 3rd special minutes? And do we have a motion?
I'll motion, we accept them.
Shannon, second? I'll second. So we have a motion and a second to approve the special meeting minutes of April 3rd. Just make the rounds. Mark?
Aye.
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 Aye, for unanimous, 4-0. The minutes are approved. Brings us to regular business, item 6A. I think there's a lot of interest in hearing from Mr. Farland and Van Levitt, Lynette. Thank you, quite close. Thank you. General Manager McElhaney, if I would point it on the screen, then everybody can see it, and
That sounds good. We'll direct the slides.
yeah, fantastic.
My cheat version here, so.
Yeah, it looks like, and several of those photos, those photos are gonna be, quickly in sequence, but very powerful.
Yeah, I hope so, and this is, I think Dave and I both are pretty casual, this is a pretty open discussion, and, we love transparency and engagement, so that helps us kind of hone in on the interests that you folks may have, particular topics and so forth, so.
So does that mean questions as you go?
I'm fine with that, but yeah.
So just raise hands and, yeah.
Yeah, that's great for us and appreciate the opportunity for, to be here and interact with you folks. We've been involved in, these momentous projects in Cambria since my first week on the job with ARC Forestry in 2021. So it's been really exciting to see how it's evolved. The relationships we've formed, the places we've been able to visit, and the work we've been able to achieve collaboratively, from a regional scale. So appreciate everyone's input all the time. And, yeah, happy to be here and answer some questions. So, just to kick it off, if you want to go back to the title slide, so folks have our contact if they need it. So I'm Riley McFarland, I'm RP at ARC Forestry. Like I said, I've been with the company since 2021. I love parks, recreation, and open space, so I'm really appreciative of the job that allows me to kind of blend those two worlds together and serve those open spaces that I frequent. I'm also an avid disc golfer, so I'm really excited about the prospect of East Range coming up with a course. Is someone leading that here? Okay, excellent.
And by the way, someone's gonna wonder, are these slides on the website? And yes, they are. And Ms. Dodson got those on the website this morning, so the slides are there.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, Riley. David Van Lina, I'm a registered professional forester with ARC. I've been with the company since 22 and long time forester in the Santa Cruz Mountains area. And I've spent a lot of time in Cambria, friends and family here. So we'd be doing some work down here and I'm here to support Riley and the project and answer questions as needed.
Excellent. So yeah, next slide would be great. So like I said, this is a pretty general overview of some of the work we've been conducting and our process for getting to these treatment approaches on these various properties. So just to kind of list some of those objectives, we want to discuss the regional land use and progression of the existing conditions on Fiscalini Ranch Preserve as we've seen them, but we still have a lot of work to do to obviously figure that out, understanding that's a very special place to probably just about everybody in this room. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of hands in the cookie jar, as they say. So navigating, that balance is our job as consultants. So we have a role in both the San Luis Obispo Monterey Pine Restoration Coalition, which is the Forest Health Grant under the Fire Safe Council that Dan Turner is a executive director of. That spans across 4 properties currently. So that's Fiscalini Ranch Preserve, Covell Ranch, First Ranch at Pico Creek, and CDFW property adjacent to Covell Ranch, Cambria Pines Reserve. So we have a hand in managing that project, coordinating contractors, scoping the properties for appropriate treatments, conducting layout, and then implementing operations. In addition to that, we're also involved with the Upper Salinas Los Talos RCD and their existing fire prevention grant, which has evolved into what we're calling slow resil. So you may be familiar with that terminology by now. That's the San Luis Obispo County regional ecological strategy for improving landscapes. So yeah, so that spans, that's in a proposed phase right now with the Coastal Commission. We're working very closely with the Coastal Commission to get that approved, hopefully by August, and that spans 88,000 acres. So I talked, I mentioned earlier the momentous projects that we've been involved with. Well, we're carrying on that momentum to try to get these projects streamlined across a greater landscape scale. So we're very fortunate to be a part of both of these projects and see how they've evolved. And it's just, from, like I said, day one and visiting Covell Ranch and trying to figure out how to treat that 650 acre piece to now talking about an 88,000 acre landscape scale forest health reduction project. It's really exciting to see how that's evolved. So keeping those objectives in mind, we can go to the next slide.
120 square miles.
What's that?
That's like 120 square miles.
That's better math than I can do on the fly, so good on you. Yeah, it's a big region and obviously, like I said, a lot of aspects to that, a lot of components, a lot of different ecosystems, landscapes, landowners, perspectives, objectives. So it's going to be a long-term effort. The idea is that it is that, it's gonna live in perpetuity and provide long-term opportunities for people to conduct these forest health fields reduction treatments across a greater scale. And really maximize these public grant funds that your taxpayer dollars are funding, right? Because we don't want to get caught up in permitting, document preparation all the time. We want to be able to put this money to the ground and make it valuable as it's meant to be. So this slide just showcases a few of those primary partners we've worked with over the years. And I should probably have green space on here at this point because we've been working closely with Corinne and Strawberry Canyon, but yeah, there you go. But it just goes to show the amount of, coordination and communication we have to have across the board with various entities, both private and public, regulatory, fiscal agencies that are funding these projects, contractors on the ground, CAL FIRE, who's a project proponent on both Hearst Ranch and Covell Ranch, Ascent Environmental, another private consulting firm we work very closely with and collaboratively to develop these large scale documents. So yeah, you may see some folks you recognize up there, and there's plenty more to speak on. You have anything yet? I'm just flying through this off the cuff, so bear with me here. So let's move to this next slide. So one of, I would say, the most effective tools we have as foresters to understand landscape progression and historical land use is these aerial photos in the modern era. So these are a very powerful tool that's available to the public. You can find them yourself through, I think, Santa Barbara University houses a lot of these aerial images. Some date back earlier than 1937, but this is Biscalini Ranch dating back to that time, 1937. That's the earliest photo we were able to see. And I cropped these and tried to orient them as best I could, but if you notice that little yellow star, that's meant to act as a reference point on the ranch, and that's a clearing on the ranch that's right off the Tipton Trail entrance. You can find that pretty easily. And if you look at how Matt's zooming into that, if you think about that clearing today compared to what this photo showcases, that's pretty drastically different in my mind. We were just out on the ranch today, looking around and came to the same conclusion, but yeah, I wanna preface this discussion as we move through these photos and just recognize what that forest looks like in 1937, really right as development in Cambria was taking off, and you can see the continuity of that forest both to the south and north, and see how that extent exists in 1937. Keep your eye on that yellow star. Anything to add there?
Just note that you can kind of see the ground from whatever altitude the airplane is flying when it took that photo. You can see the ground, and whether that was a function of the grazing that was going on, fire put on the ground to facilitate grazing or pre-contact conditions. That's an interesting point as we move through the photos.
Right. So being that this is the earliest photo we have, we can, assumptions are dangerous sometimes, but we can assume that, seeing the ground and seeing the spacing of that forest and its condition in 1937 was likely, like David said, a product of whether it was cultural burning and agricultural practices pre-European contract, or more in the modern area of grazing. I think grazing still takes place on the ranch. Is that from that time? Not at all. Okay. That is good to know. So yeah, it showcases that existing condition and keeping in mind that, some level of human induced or natural disturbance has always been a part of the system, right? And I think it's important as foresters and as community members to realize that, when we talk about the environment or ecology, we often segregate ourselves as humans from the natural system, but the truth is we're intertwined, right? We're within the system. Humans are as much a part of that system as any other thing out there, and we have managed the systems for personal objectives, since time. Anyway, so okay. I think we can move on to the next slide. So.
Is that the hub? where the star is? Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that clearing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in 1949 now. You can see this is just about 10 years later. Development's starting to kick off a little bit now. The forest conditions are relatively the same, and you can even see some expansion on the north side of that stretch leading up to Santa Rosa Creek. Yeah, just north of that star. Again, expansive forest, well-spaced trees, whether that was a product of natural disturbance or human-induced agriculture. There was always a level of that occurring in these stands. And moving right along, I think we go to 56. Thanks for zooming in on these so folks can see. So 1956, again, just a little bit more of the same conditions. You can see that the forest is starting to proliferate a little bit, as you move into the mid-century, maybe less disturbance was happening, whether that was grazing or that prehistorical cultural burning. The understory starting to flush out those spaces where you can see the ground prior are starting to fill in, right? That's because of that lack of disturbance. And moving right along to 1982, this is a good one. So now we have full-on development, right? Kind of happening in that forest stand. And Matthew, if you want to just flip back to 37, so we can keep that frame of reference to see how we've evolved from 37 to 1982 at this point. And we could just kind of cycle through those slides real quick if you want. Kind of starts painting a picture, right? It paints a picture about how we are a part of this system, and we have to inhabit these lands just like humans have since time immemorial. Okay. You practice that part.
Long time.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so another huge aspect of this slide in particular is Highway 1's been rerouted to the west at this point, right? It no longer reroutes through Main Street. And if you flip back to that 56 picture and back to 82, you can kind of see how that development of that highway rerouting has that's kind of taken out an edge of the forest north of that star. You see that? And not only that, but they were, they constructed that route. Sorry, I'm getting blown up by teams right now. They constructed that route on a natural aperture. So if you go back to 1956, and thanks Matt for cycling through these. So we're at 56 and you can almost see that drainage, that low point, kind of what you call like a marshy area. And then if you flip over to 82, you can see exactly how they utilize that natural aperture. You see that? And at the cost of some forested acreage. So now after that ground is proliferated, the understory is coming back in, the forest is expanding. Well, now we have another new form of development that's kind of setting that back maybe a little bit too. So how am I doing so far? You got anything?
No, it's just that as we're going through, you can see that the development has penned in the forest and broken it up into pieces, which also changes the kind of management that could be considered later on to bring the forest back to some more pre-contact or more natural condition.
Right. So, yes, sir.
As you move through time there, is there any record of wildfire history?
We don't have any recorded wildfire history outside of like our presumed cultural burning practices. As far as recorded wildfires in the area, there's not much outside of, I think,
1900,
the 1900, the town
Town
Cambria
burned
burned down, right? So that was,
the largest town in the county.
right, so that was the first recorded wildfire event. And yeah, obviously you're not gonna be able to see that on these photos,
Right.
but
Yeah.
that likely had an effect on the forest land around it, and as far as how that's affected this extent or footprint of the forest that we're seeing here, it's a little bit unknown. Although you shared some pretty rad, drawings from like early 1900s or 1840s that were, sketches of like the landscape, right around that contact area. I think Cambria kind of was founded in 1860. So is that right? So anyway, that showed a much more extensive contiguous forest stand prior to the development we're seeing here. So moving along, 2001, here we go. We've moved in, right? That forest is now, more or less segregated by development. Again, we're part of the system. We're moving into these lands as technology and industry evolves, you know, so does our stake on the land here. And so I think this is a really important concept that we don't think about a lot of the time. We're talking about the forest we have left, you know what I mean? Well, what forest did we have that we gave up to be able to live in these beautiful places? And so it's just something I want to keep in mind, and notice how that star, that yellow star that's the same size on all these slides is now getting closed in. That, you know, that forest is still expanding, proliferating. Monterey pine is a significant pioneer species that's going to take the opportunity where it can to proliferate itself and regenerate.
And there's cattle still on the ranch at that point.
In 2001, is that right? Okay. Yeah, so grazing still has an effect on that low level disturbance we talked about. That may be keeping the edge of this forest as tight as it is, because we don't see that, you know, prolific expansion into the grassland like you do in, let's go to 2024.
Oh, we were.
Well, yeah, so that's, shout out Kitty Connolly.
Everyone in here probably.
So again,
Went to the tree.
right, yeah, humans part of the system. Humans being part of the system, we notice that our developments have now segregated this once contiguous forest, and so we're now expanding that forest into a much greater footprint, and, you know, in terms of what we think that should be, right? And so replanting facilitates that reforestation, but we also have this expansion of the forest into the grasslands now, right? And so these are the balances we navigate all the time, and we have since prehistory. How do we balance our needs or our objectives with what we think the, you know, the native landscape needs, or what we think it should be? And, you know, given that Monterey pine and the forests are one of, you know, this stand and this forest is one of 5 in the world, I think, you know, pretty clear picture that we should be prioritizing what we think is rare and sensitive and, you know, frankly susceptible to mega disturbances like we've seen over the past decades. So, what am I missing there? Anything?
Just the amount of kind of complete compartmentalization between the highway, the ocean, and the development on both sides. I mean, the ranch boundary stands out even without a parcel map. You know exactly where the ranch is.
Absolutely. So that now becomes an open space as we see it, right? That becomes our recreation, that becomes our park, you know? But just, you know, I hope that paints a picture, and hopefully not a drastic one, but just how we've moved into these natural landscapes and what they develop. Yes, sir.
So, MK, you probably know this, but are we including the East Ranch in this discussion of what the Viscalini Ranch is, or is it really just the West Ranch we're talking about in terms of?
The west side of the East Ranch in particular too.
Yeah,
Well, are you talking about the discussion or the work that will happen on the ground? Because the discussion.
Let's focus on the work on the ground.
I guess the work on the
Yeah,
ground.
so this is just including the West Ranch,
This
for
is
this
West-
forest
okay.
West Ranch, yeah, so we've identified, and I'm sorry, I don't know the exact, is it 30 acres out there?
I don't remember.
Okay, I think it's.
It's about 36 acres, I believe it
36
was.
acres, okay, so we have 36 acres identified under this forest health grant. To be able to treat a portion of the West Ranch, yeah, thank you, thanks for clarity. But if you need any perspectives on the disc golf course, I'm your guy. Okay, so just before we move on to this slide, Matt, maybe we're just gonna go back, see if there's any other questions about, you know, these aerial photos of the landscape and some of the land use considerations.
And then.
Anything?
And there's a lot of energy on that, so what are you gonna do?
Well, yeah, totally, so,
This is how we got here.
yeah,
Good, we set the stage.
Really
I
excited.
don't wanna kill
Really
I don't wanna kill the pinnacle, but, you know, we're figuring it out. I hope that's not a lame climax to this build. But yeah, so it just, you know, pictures paint 1,000 words, just like they do for you, just like they do for us as foresters. You know, it really helps us kind of gauge where we're at and what we're dealing with and how we want to move forward. And the other important aspect of this too is, you know, as we move into unprecedented rates of climate change, unprecedented mega disturbances in the form of wildfire, drought, insect infestation, you know, there's traditionally a lot of talk about, well, how do we get back to native conditions? How do we get back to pre-contact conditions? Well, in my mind, pre-contact conditions are gone. Those days are gone, right? To me, it's like, how do we move these forests into the future to adapt to these conditions we're seeing today? And a lot of the time that traditional knowledge doesn't apply. You know, you can work that into your toolbox and use that as a tool. But truthfully, in unprecedented times calls for unprecedented action, right? And so we're trying to figure out how to bring these forests into the future so they can adapt long-term into these conditions that we're dealing with today. I think that's another really important possibility. Anything else, David? I'm just kind of flying here.
No, you're doing great, man.
Okay. So yeah, we want to move into a little bit of treatment dynamics now. So, you know, Michael set us up swimmingly with what are we gonna do? Well, this is Cobalt Ranch. I mentioned this is one of our first projects in Cambria that took almost a decade to develop and implement on the ground, given the regulatory environment, not having done this type of work in the past, the permitting processes to get there. And by September 22, we had, you know, this is an example of the treatment we conducted on Cobalt Ranch. The Cobalt Ranch is a two-part treatment, by the way. There's the shaded fuel break that a lot of folks see from Bridge Street, which is exactly that. It's a fuel break. It's designed to provide an opportunity for fire suppression resources to get in and stop a fire and create a buffer between the community and the natural landscape, right, or WUI.
So you're talking the west side of Bridge Street
Yes.
where that heinous fence is?
Yep, heinous fence, exactly. The west side of Bridge Street, where you'll see the shaded fuel break, and I think it's been a while since we've gone in and conducted maintenance in there. We have conducted a level of maintenance, but beyond 100 feet from Bridge Street, it breaks into the forest health treatments. So you can kind of see that line 100 feet from Bridge Street. You can see where that break is, and it goes into more of a what I like to call a clustery, ugly forest, because that's what we're trying to promote, is that there's a mosaic and ecological forest that I don't like to say mimics, but is analogous to what a low-level disturbance like fire would conduct. You know, not a ground fire that's going to replace the stand, but a low-level ground fire that might clear out some of that vegetation. So this is in the forest health zone. So this showcases, this is right after treatment has happened. Obviously, you're seeing a lot of chips on the ground. You know, we sometimes refer to it as open heart surgery because that's kind of what it looks like. You see these forests persist for such a long time in the conditions they're in. And then you see this drastic change. But again, this is what disturbance looks like, right? And disturbance is very much a part of the ecological system, ecological processes. So a couple things I just want to point out here is the age class distribution. You see dominant trees, you know, and this stand was super dense, so there's not a lot of outward growth on a lot of these stems, but I think there's trees probably upwards of 14 inches in this picture. Smaller diameter trees. Our prescription for this treatment was cutting live trees less than 8, any tree that was considered a hazard or dead, dying, diseased up to any size. So using those bounds in that prescription, we're able to, you know, create this mosaic or use our paintbrush, so to speak, to kind of paint this picture, right? You can see the stovepipe stump there in the front, that's a wildlife feature. You can see material on the ground that provides refugia for dispersed red-legged frogs, which is a sensitive species in the area. You can see some underlying understory shrubs in this picture as well. And this was all handwork, by the way. This was a 10-person hand crew with a track chipper. They eventually got another track chipper on site, but that's all it is. It's folks with chainsaws and a track chipper conducting this work at Cobalt. Moving along to 3 years later. This is the response of the treated area. So you can see those chips are a little less poignant in the picture. The material we left behind on the ground that was too big to chip persists. Some of these yearling saplings are sprouting up and flooding out. We have ferns coming in. We have light penetration to the forest floor with some shade too. You know, this is the idea of a mosaic that we're trying to create. And beyond you can kind of see in the background, this, you know, the foreground is where the treatment persists, but in the background, we have this control patch. So there's this, I think it's a 10 or 5 acre control patch on Cobalt Ranch where nothing was done, right? Just in the interior of the forest to create that edge effect. maintain habitat features, create that clustery, ugly clumpiness, right, that we want to achieve. Anything?
And the Cobell Ranch has a slightly different, history than I think Viscalini. Up until maybe the thirties, there was a commercial sawmill there, so they were cutting the trees actively. The stand was a lot more uniform, than I've seen at Viscalini. And there was way more, damage to the tree. There's a lot more disease and insects. There's dwarf mistletoe, there's pine pitch canker and blister rust that are very prevalent in the stand. So that accounted for a lot of the smaller trees that they decided to take out because they're trying to reduce that component in the stand. So it's different. And these are example photos just to kind of give you an idea of what treatment looks like before, during, after, and just to give you some things to think about as we figure out what we're going to propose with Viscalini.
Totally.
So there's no like replanting trees, because this was originally a redwood forest. There's no like replanting trees, it's just fuel elimination.
I mean,
Or
as
fuel elimination.
yeah, I think the redwood era was, pre-1900s, and even earlier than that. And, as we know, redwoods extend up to the Mexican border that exists today. So that just adds to the idea of like moving these stands into the future based on how they want to adapt to the conditions, right? So we see vegetation changes all the time. We see transitions happening actively right now. The wildfires are perpetuating that. And so, yeah, just given that the rarity of this forest in the world, we're definitely promoting Monterey pines here. And they're very good at regenerating themselves given the right conditions. And I think those right conditions are warmth, sunlight, obviously lack of competition among the residuals. Did you have some?
Yeah, I've noticed the last time I toured Cobell in some of the treatment areas, when they open up the canopy like that and the spacing, the saplings are really thriving. So it encourages regeneration and new growth, yeah.
It's pretty striking and honestly, like, again, full transparency, being that this was kind of the first treatment of its kind in the region, and for me as a new forester, I was waiting for that response, that light bulb moment where I could tell like, okay, these treatments did work. Because prior to us coming in, and Matt, if you want to flip back to slide 10 there, prior to these treatments starting, there wasn't a lot of that natural regen going on at all in the understory. Things were choked out. It was completely dense. We saw trees per acre upwards of like 600 to 800 trees per acre. When an ideal Monterey pine forest based on forest we worked in the past is somewhere around 200 trees per acre. So that's like a 20-foot spacing or so around the tree. And then coming into the stand in 2025, and we can flip to the next slide too, is taking during the same trip. It's almost too much regen at this point. You know what I mean? It's like we've expressed the stand, Monterey pine being adapted to fire and disturbance as a pioneer species. It thrives in those conditions where you're providing that level of low intensity disturbance to the stand, and it takes off once that sunlight hits the ground. So that's a great addition.
Can I add something to that? One of the things that I noticed today in walking around at the preserve was you had some very dense, very overgrown areas, a lot of these, like 400 to 600 stems per acre. And then you break out in an area where there was maybe a lot of mortality for one reason or another. A couple of big trees fell, so there was a natural opening, and that's where you see the regeneration. Like in the middle of this overly dense area, there was a quarter acre opening from trees falling or something happened, and that's where you start to run into some variability in the understory and some seedlings.
Yeah,
the gaps.
And the gaps, which, a lot of the time are like native meadows, grasslands that are, they're being encroached on these pioneer species that have a better hold on the landscape at that point when they have the opportunity. I think some of the edge effect of Viscalini Ranch, that western edge of the existing stand has been held back a little bit by the prevailing winds in that area. I think that's a big driver. And we noticed, you got the planted seeds out, or planted seedlings out on that grassland that, some of them are dying off probably from just like, desiccation, maybe not ideal site conditions because they're, you know, it's the same reason they're not able to regenerate into that area naturally, although they are out there quite a bit. That makes sense.
For our species here,
Yeah.
what's a healthy population per acre?
Per acre, like we target that 200 trees per acre, but
200,
that,
okay.
you know, I'd say 200 to 300, but we're creating that most today, right? So it's pretty site specific, and that includes the the understory component, shrubs underneath these trees and so forth. And then obviously a diverse age class distribution, so we don't have one age class dominating the stand. We have small trees, we have big trees, we have mid-range trees, you know, because we always want to propagate that next generation. That's kind of
You need diversity in
diversity.
your town, in your forest, in your everything.
Cuisine.
You don't die off and new ones come up.
So yeah, and that's, you know, one of the big reasons that Dan Turner contracted us for work down here on Covell Ranch originally is because Steve Otten, my boss, had extensive involvement in the help me out here. Monterey Pine Stands up near Swamp Pacific Ranch, Año Nuevo. Año Nuevo, yeah. So he was a resource manager at Swamp Pacific Ranch for a long time and had extensive involvement in the studies that happened up there. We also took a lot from the Monterey stand, which is near a golf course. I can't think of the name of it, but there's also extensive studies going on there, and some of our partner foresters in the area have helped us out with that too. So just to say, it's not Steve's first rodeo in Monterey Pine, but okay, so let's go on to the next slide here. And this is a response 7 years out from treatment. So this was another round of handwork and track chipping treatments that were completed in 2016 under the governor's exemption at the time, which we have another one, by the way, currently another governor's exemption of it. But that was how this stand was treated in 2016, despite the regulatory and permitting bounds that prevented us from treating the whole forest at that time. So that's Keith Seidel and Spencer Gordon in the picture. Shout out to those guys. So you can see that response and the ferns coming in, the understory flushing out, the oaks thriving, the spacing between trees, the residual material on the ground providing refugia. We were out here with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service talking about red-legged frogs, and they absolutely loved this site. You know, 7 years out from treatment, they said, "This is dynamite. This is what I want you to achieve with the treatments you're proposing." So again, just working with those agencies, finding a balance and navigating, you know, the myriad of resource protection measures that we're considering with the work we're doing in the area. So just another example of response a little bit without anything to add to this one, sir?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay. More examples of treatment. So this is Rancho Merino Ecological Reserve. And believe it or not, compared to that picture that was taken at Codwell Ranch immediately after treatment, this is a picture that was taken immediately after treatment at Rancho Merino. So this is kind of the other side of the spectrum, right? This is another treatment approach based on site-specific conditions, landowner wishes, which we're obviously navigating a lot of the time, and bringing those puzzle pieces together to see how we can make something work. This is also a hand crew, no track chipper. This is a pile and burn project, but similarly, they had a crew of, I think it was 10 folks with chainsaws. Firestorm Incorporated was the company that came out there, their contract fire crew that completed this work. And this is mainly focused on down, dead, and dying trees with a light level of thinning live trees up to 8 inches diameter, just like we did at Coppola Ranch. But to me, those two images are striking. You know, you can see that the two different treatment approaches based on the objectives or the current conditions of the stand and what we're trying to proliferate and express. And going on to the next slide here. This is just an example of the piles that were built out there. This is a lot of dead down pine snags that were standing, and you can see right to the right of that pile, that standing snag we left behind is wildlife habitat. Keith Seidel's excellent at coming out with us and picking out some of the legacy snags he wanted to leave behind for future wildlife habitat, right? Always thinking about the future generations. Moving on to the next slide. This is a fun one. It's on fire. So yeah, just another example of a treatment approach we can take, and, there was some light discussion earlier on about lopping and scattering, how do we deal with this material? That is like the number one problem we have with these types of projects. What do we do with the material? There's an excess of material. We can modify the fuels and leave everything in place, so we're not removing anything from the system, or we can remove things from the system through methods like pile burning, chipping and hauling, curtain burners, what have you, you know what I mean? So a lot of the time, and in the case of Covell, not a single piece of material was removed from that property. It was just modified, right? Because we chipped it and broadcast it on the ground. At Rancho Marina Preserve, we're removing those fuels from the system in terms of pile burning. But what does pile burning entail? It entails smoke, it entails air quality, it entails community support, it entails seasonality. We couldn't get these piles burnt until the next year. See the date on that, see that slide prior. That's May 2024, right as that pile was built. And then if you go to the next one, that's March 2025. So just about a year later, we were able to burn those piles. Maybe funding runs out, maybe there is no rains to where we're able to light those piles. So it's kind of a gamble, and there's a lot of drivers behind that, and whether that's an efficient process, but sometimes it is the most sensible tool in the bag to be able to treat this material in excess. You have anything to add there?
Just there are a limited number of crews that have the insurance that will allow them to conduct burning. The liability environment in California and other places doesn't allow a lot of crews to have that ability. Firestorm was one of the few in the state that had that ability to do both vegetation treatment like we wanted, and also conduct the burning later as was needed. So just a kind of not a big contractor pool that can conduct that work.
But if you still got half of it to burn still?
Yeah, they got about
More than half, yeah.
240 out of the 500. It was slow going. So there's, there was complexities that went along with the pilot burns, so, weather and the window that's provided for under the AQMD for allowing burns, and so you end up with a constraint.
It was a beautiful drizzly day. I was watching and I didn't see any flack in the community media that I know of.
It was, super successful first burn, and the first time Cambria has probably seen controlled burn on this scale for some time, so. We're super glad that the community was supportive. A lot of notification went into that, a lot of, word of mouth and gaining support and notifying people ahead of time, so.
Yeah, in some prior conversations with Corinne and I think with Spencer, the idea of biochar.
Sure.
Where is that? Is that kind of been?
It's probably a ways down the road towards being feasible. To haul material off of property, is extremely expensive because, like David knows, making multiple trips, I think that's what you're talking about. Whether that's in a short time period or over a span of time, it becomes very expensive and.
Can that not be done on site?
To turning things into biochar, that would be through the process of probably pile burning.
Just different pile burning, right?
So RCD actually purchased and it's on a trailer, and so we at some point in time, we might be able to do a small amount, like in the Grove and not very fast burning, but it won't be a major component in the removal, but I'm into it, I think it just even from getting Cal Poly graduate students and stuff out there too, and just seeing the different kinds of treatments that are possible to get.
And just as an alternative and scalable, is it feasible, does it work? Does it have a future, or is it kind of just?
I think it has a future, probably as a component to a number of different approaches, it's very slow going. You have to have someone kind of monitoring it all the time, that costs money, and that's the reality of these projects, they're grant funded, we only have a certain X amount of dollars to spend, and so it definitely comes down to feasibility, but we're definitely considering that. I know a lot of agencies and nonprofits are coming up with air curtain burners and so forth now to try to implement that. But just another tool in the toolbox, right? So.
Fair enough, thank you. Yeah, right now it's somewhat novel because they're kind of cumbersome to get around. If you want it's big enough to really be efficient, you have difficulty getting it into places. And then our local CAL FIRE unit, they want the area cleared around, and it's hard to burn it, find burn windows during the summertime. So you end up burning it during the winter. So do you have access for heavy equipment? Can you get in? Are the roads gonna sustain that kind of work? So there's all these different things that you kind of have to go through, you know, in a sort of a checklist sort of arrangement. So right now, it's not financially feasible. There isn't a big market for it. You know, there's definitely some advantages from an agricultural perspective to having biochar incorporated in your fields.
Right.
But it's not a for sure thing, so it hasn't really kind of taken off as a market. So there's like you get those biochar and you're like, okay, this is great. Now what do you do with this? Do you chip? Like sometimes you can get people to take chip, sometimes not. And it's that same arrangement.
So I think we're right at that point where we're going to fiscal international reserve. We've got a half hour left on our agenda.
Yeah, we can start.
Yeah, so.
Do the rest of this.
Yeah.
Just, I hope this all sets the stage for our process and how we're approaching these projects on a site-specific basis. But yeah, this is just in the ranch reserve, taken in February on the walk with Kitty and David. This just showcases some of the existing conditions. This isn't representative of the entire ranch, by the way. Obviously, there's been previous work predominantly on the east side and front end, or south side of the ranch. And there's some areas that look great, you know, we don't have to hardly do anything unless there's some maintenance. But yeah, these are just some of that high density pine forest that we talked about earlier. And you can see the senescence in the lower crown, right? You can see the die off of those trees and not much going on in the mid ranges, so. Anything other? And then just, yeah, showcasing that regen amount, you know, in the grassland, that's, the slide prior to that, Matt. You know, we have a lot of regen out there. Sometimes it's not occurring in maybe the best places we want it to occur. And so, you know, we're talking about reforestation and some of the grasslands where maybe it's a little bit more conducive. And not to say we're gonna kill off all these seedlings, but we do want to be cognizant of like natural meadows and native grasslands and openings within the forest interior that create that mosaic effect.
And this area here is not what the volunteers planted.
That's right.
Yeah, this is not
Within the forest, yeah.
Yeah, I recognize that.
Yeah, so again, humans being part of the system and kind of managing for our objectives and.
No, there'd be wood chips that bring planted.
This is just a slide showcasing monarchs. Obviously, that's, you know, a very sensitive resource in the region and the area. Something we're working with Berkshire Society on to develop a set of guidelines for forest health, fields reduction treatments around these and other resources like Native American cultural resources, historic and so forth. So we're looking out for the butterflies too. So this is a pretty important slide. This is just a general timeline. You want to kind of talk about this?
So we've been working with Dan Turner at the Fire State Council, and we've got several other projects that are part of the same grant. And those are a little bit further along on the planning and implementation schedule. But we're trying to block out a theoretical schedule when operations might commence, when we have some you know, available contractors. And so we wanted to put some, you know, just a theoretical timeline on paper, just as some information on when it might happen. It's not gonna happen, you know, treatment's not gonna happen this year, but it may happen in the next, you know, year to two. And we just wanted to kind of highlight that and just gonna be advised. And this is also kind of the opportunity for us to talk about, you know, community support and, you know, the outreach that can happen with the neighbors. I know that there are communities on both sides, and so it's a good opportunity to start thinking about outreach and bring people into the plans.
Any questions at this point? The rest of our slides are slow result related, but being cognizant of time and interest, you know, we can talk about that 88,000 acre project a little bit, or we can, you know, we're fluid on how we want to proceed here. But are there any questions on the salinity treatments or forest health grant side of things right now?
And we can answer questions on both when we wrap things up. So,
I guess it looks like we'll have ample opportunity in the future as you're, getting, the treatment plans.
Totally. Yeah, I didn't bring any bread and butter for you guys today, but we're working on it. We're happy to keep you in the loop moving forward, so. I think
It's not like where, your chainsaws are coming next week. It's
no,
gonna be a while.
no, we got some time to figure some things out.
Yeah.
We're working closely with Kitty and others to make sure that those goals and objectives are well aligned. So yeah, maybe just briefly running through this slow result project, just so you folks are aware. Again, this is an 88,000 acre permit going under a Cal VTP with Upper Stanislaus Talbot's RCD as the project proponent or lead agency. And Matt, we can go to the next slide and just show the extent of that. So this covers that northwestern portion of San Luis Obispo County, which also is lined up with RCD's jurisdiction, right? So the red line is the county line, the blue line to the east is coastal zone line, and all that yellow is what we're proposing to go under permit. This would be open toolbox on forest health field reduction, basically. Not to say we're gonna apply all of those tools, but it gives us mobility based on site-specific conditions to be able to apply certain tools, in certain places. Doesn't include federal lands. This is a statewide program, and it doesn't include the active Cal VTPs like Covell Ranch, Rancho Marino, First Ranch, and so forth. And I think the next slide is probably the most important one for folks that are interested. It's just identifying that this will provide secret coverage for long-term forest health field reduction projects that landowners might want to implement with grant funds. So that doesn't obligate them to anything. It doesn't prohibit them from conducting work they're already conducting. It's really just there if they want to use it. It doesn't set any precedent as far as what they're able to do on their lands. It provides an efficient permitting mechanism through Coastal Commission, which is a huge regulatory agency, as folks know, and it takes a long time to get projects through. So this would.
Who?
Coastal Commission.
Oh.
But yeah, so we're working closely with Coastal Commission and their jurisdiction, under an existing public works plan that's held by RCD. Spencer Gordon is the shepherd of that public works plan. So he is basically the agency in between, the contractors and Coastal Commission to be able to facilitate that public works plan. We're working on priority areas that are gonna provide shovel-ready projects, as we call them. So, if grant funds become available in the future and folks want to apply to grants in the future, we have a number of projects that are just ready to go, permitted. They just need the funds to be able to implement them. And again, just that last note, it doesn't create any restrictions on the landowner. It doesn't constrain any other permits they may already have or work they've done or work they're planning to do, or change any current land use practices. This is totally a option for landowners, both private and public. And we can move on to that last slide real quick. Do you have anything?
No, it's just that the idea is that it's going to be an existing CEQA coverage umbrella that will make it much easier and much cheaper for individual landowner or services district or someone to implement a project. And when you apply for grant funding, if you have your CEQA coverage in place, your application gets more points. They look at it more favorably knowing that you have your environmental permitting in place. There's still work that needs to happen on the ground, and the variability inside that 88,000 acres is tremendous. So that it doesn't just allow you to go do anything anywhere, but it gives you the overall umbrella coverage that allows you to apply for grants and have kind of a starting place. And so the RCD is utilizing that money to provide that umbrella for those acres with the idea that it'll be much cheaper, easier, more cost effective to do a project in that area. Once it's approved, there'll be some coastal commission buy-in. And the idea is that it'll be much less of the money will go to the permitting, the discussion, and all the negotiations with agencies. That's already being done. It'll be more focused on treatments on the ground.
Yes.
Do you have any concerns about what's happening with the government right now about any of these grants not being available? Because you know, we're in a state of flux.
It's wild out there. Most of our projects are state funded projects, you know, like the bounds to federal funds are occurring at that federal level. Not to say it doesn't have an impact on state funds, you know, if you
Yeah,
talk to
because
Cal
a lot of
Fire.
a lot of the state funded grants.
Right, have a
being
nexus
asked
with federal
because
grants,
of the-
right?
Yeah.
So, I think that just ties into the idea that, you know, before some ultimatum happens, you know, like we have a chance now to implement these funds before they go away. Grant funding is certainly not a definite, you know, they could go away anytime. So, making these projects more efficient, permitting larger scales of land and being able to go in when ready is a huge step forward in being able to treat landscape level forest health like we've been talking about for so long. Yeah, we're talking with some private landowners that have pretty big swaths of land in the area already to conduct a level of treatment on their lands, but this could also trickle down to the private, you know, landowner that has just a small parcel to be able to conduct the attention.
Yes, sir. As far as the actual permitting is involved, like the work that you're anticipating to do in fiscal year reserve, that's not Cal VTP.
No, that's a good point. So Fisting Ranch will be covered under slow resil eventually when that gets approved in August. But right now, we're operating under their existing EIR, which allows a level of forest health fuels reduction. I mean, as far as treatments go and what we're able to do, that the EIR allows that. But yeah, that's at least right now the permitting document we're doing. But once slow resil is approved in August, you know, we'll have mobility through that as well.
That's a Cal VTP.
That's a Cal VTP is slow resil.
Will be applying to fiscal year.
Potentially, I mean, it's really like, we do a level of environmental compliance with Cal Fire, who's the grant funder. And we have to identify which permits we're using for the work. So right now, we're identifying the EIR, but by the time treatments take place, you know, that may be updated. There's nothing like bounding us on either permit.
It's not that at this point.
It's not what?
Not really fully defined at this point.
Not fully defined, but yeah, just kind of getting the ball rolling right now and deciding how we want to move forward based on the specifications and treatment approaches we eventually develop. Yes, sir.
That's great. So slow resil will be in place when it's
Probably.
time to.
Probably, yeah.
FRP plans.
Yeah, and I think, you know, given the grant fund climate moving forward, they're probably more likely to fund a Cal VT project as they're trying to progress that program on a statewide level than maybe they would in EIR, although that doesn't limit us from being able to apply these grant funds to this project at all. Yes, Corinne?
I want to say that the coastal BTP that they're putting together, one of the really positive things that I see about it is that for each, even though it's an overall regional permit, each landowner still has autonomy and control over the treatment and what gets done. Because at first it sounds like, oh my God, you can just have one treatment. You still are able to set your own treatment plan, and like Rancho Marino different than Strawberry Canyon different than Fiscaline. So that's, for me, that was a really positive thing about the coastal BTP idea. It was a great idea, plus not permitting each of these projects going forward. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, landowner discretion is a huge part of what we do, and it still has to be authorized through the RCD. So like we said, just providing ourselves with mobility and options allows us to be able to conduct a very amount of treatment across the land. Anything else out there, sir? We took up a little more time than we intended, but.
Yeah, but it's, you know, this is really important to the community, to the open space aspect of what we're about. I don't see any hands up. Do we have other questions in the room? We've been kind of free flow, and that's good for a conversation like this.
Like we said, glad to keep your group in the loop as we move forward and conduct more of these outreach sessions for sure. So thanks for listening.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. Are you gonna be back as things progress for updates or?
Yeah, as you see the timeline, you know, we're actually hit the ground, but we're working vigorously on figuring out fiscal year end. It's, absolutely, yeah, working closely with Kitty and some of her board members to be able to, implement that level of vendor
If
discretion.
public input goes through board meeting, CCSD, how?
Well, I mean,
Is
still,
it-
they're gonna be here again.
Yeah,
No, I'm just wondering, does,
And
outside of this venue, does the board address this in any of the regular board meetings coming up, or?
oh, so I think what you're getting at is who approves
Kind of,
what goes forward?
yeah, fair
It's not
enough.
us. I don't think it's a CCSD board. No. No, thank you. Yes,
If there's a
no.
partnership or agreement, we would need to have council
There's-
review
there's-
and then have a resolution.
yeah, so the CCSD, we're recommending they file a notice of determination as a public agency, so that NOD will effectively allow them to utilize this permit moving forward with authorization under the RCD. So that's the approval mechanism at the board level. As far as like approval at the state level, RCD has their own board approval mechanisms as the project proponent, and then we're working with Coastal Commission, like we said, who's going to approve it within their jurisdiction in August.
Would there be any,
The actual treatment plan for the ranch would be, I guess vetted through the CCSD board, right? I mean.
would there be an agreement between you and the CCSD?
Yeah,
So,
So we also have a, letter of commitment.
okay.
We have a MOU,
MOU, so,
memorandum of
yeah.
understanding, but also a letter of commitment allowing use of the EIR for these treatment applications.
Right, so that would be council review and resolution by board.
I think it did have to go through the board, and I wish Matt didn't be, because he's definitely part of that process, but
Will
yeah.
it come through here and then we make the recommendation, or just flow straight to the board?
I would suggest you go through here and then have a recommendation.
The open spaces committee and then.
Recommendation.
So,
And all the treatments and
Yeah.
stuff like that, existing permits, the EIR is CCSD's EIR, so they own it, so things that go with it.
Yeah.
Good.
So obviously, a very pivotal question. Thank you, Jeff.
that is
And thanks, Mr. Green, that's clear path forward. So we'll be, key themes I'm hearing, respect for history, thoughtful treatment, long future and collaboration. So, yeah, we'll be talking again.
Yeah, I appreciate being a.
Forest health.
Forest health.
Forest health. Cheers.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
No other questions, then I'll move on to the next agenda topic. Thank you. You're delighted to have you stay. If you need to split, we understand and we'll be,
Everything we
We'll
do
hurt
is
feelings.
fascinating here.
Just golf.
yeah, let's go. On the wall.
No, thanks for having us.
Great presentation, though, Jim. Thank you.
Yeah, this is fabulous. Okay, so here we are, it's quarter to four. So the next topic on the agenda, discuss and update pros goals.
Which is another 2-hour-long discussion.
Yeah, and it feels like, we have, we're at a fork in the road, as often is the case. We, one fork is, shucks, we dig in and we extend the agenda. The other fork in the road is, let's just talk about where we are, in terms of the pre-application meeting, what the current thoughts are, and then recognize that the June meeting on Juneteenth is canceled because our regularly scheduled meeting falls on staff holiday. So it'll be all the way to July before we meet again, or we schedule a special meeting going forward. So that's, so what I'm hearing on the pushback is like, let's have a quick chat and then,
Yeah, because I would like the opportunity to at least introduce the idea of our goals. The proposal for how we're gonna go forward with deciding on our goals. And then maybe that lets us all think about it, stew on it and decide, maybe some people come back with some ideas. Wanna raise their hand to be in charge of things, which is what I'm hoping for.
thank you.
Gary's not
Very
here, I
much.
was gonna find
Jack
out
Dawson,
thing.
right? Yeah, and find a date when Gary's with us too. Because
Yeah.
we want everyone's hand up.
Yeah, because this, I mean, I am thinking about this, and it's just real collaborative, real messy, so.
So you're suggesting that discussion right now,
Just a quick
quick hit,
and then we stew on it.
will that give us time to?
No, because we need Matt here for this.
Oh, did Matt leave? Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
The Met had a.
so we'll ping
Okay.
him separately on this. anyway.
Okay, great, yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna get up in the map. So the
So, and,
components,
and did you give us that, like, the pre-application meeting hasn't happened yet and why, and that wasn't in a version.
okay, pre-application with the county meeting has not happened yet. We just got the paperwork to start completing, you know, putting together what we need for that. And it's being counted. The pre-application meeting will help us decide which one of these components we can tackle, you know, priority wise. It's easy to tackle, and which ones, of course, are gonna be a lot harder to tackle. I had some great conversations with county parks people about some of these projects and, you know, their experience, and so got a little bit of insight. Same with my plant in the planning department, he helped me out a little bit too, but. We all know this, we've covered this many times, but we have broken this out into components. The reason we broke it out into components was that we could tackle these as a project, so this is phase 3, these projects would be phase 3.1, 3.2, and we could break them out that way. To your point last time, we don't have an overarching plan for the way the park works together, looks. And so I was thinking about that, and one of our components that we could break out could be landscaping and pathways as a component to this. To kind of bring everything together, because that's what brings the park together is the landscaping and the pathways, the egress through the park. So we have, of course, the playground, which is a big project, the volleyball court, another big project, playing fields, another big project. I want to lump all the picnic areas, which would be the gazebo picnic area and this picnic area right here, which would contain portion of the cornhole, together as one picnic area component, so that whoever wants to be in charge of that can kind of do the whole thing. The reason being that we want to, while we're doing that particular part of this, we want to design the look and the feel of signage, benches, tables, gazebos, and that will also feed into the dog park. They're waiting for that from us, so that's kind
You
of.
get that
a big part.
cohesive that Mr. Jaffe was talking about.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and then the disc golf and the loop trail. The loop trail, I'm really hoping to leave off as a component because I really believe that we're not going to meet with any resistance. And as far as I'm concerned, hopefully there'll be a work party, spread wood chips, the loop trail is done. So it'll be the playground, volleyball court, playing field, picnic area, disc golf, and then the overall pathways and landscaping and design, we could even include signage in that. So that's my thought. I don't want to be, I'm not the final authority on this, like I was hoping that everybody had, ideas or input or, a different way to tackle this is, a possibility. I don't know if this is the right way, what I'm thinking.
Well, we've talked about this some time.
Yeah,
I mean, I support it. I think it's great, but I may be biased.
just because that's how we.
Because that's how we've always thought about it, but
Exactly.
it makes sense to me from so many different ways. So if I take volleyball, right? I mean, I know the volleyball court, I know dimensions, I know what it takes to build a volleyball court, be responsible for speccing it, funding it, maintaining it, all the elements around the volleyball court and build my, tribe around that,
Exactly.
right?
So if you're the directly responsible individual, the
Right.
DRI for the project, doesn't mean you're doing it by yourself.
Right.
It just means that you're going to take lead on doing it. And it will involve, coordinating with county and Jim. It'll involve fundraising, grant writing, all sorts of stuff. And we can all, of course, help each other. But you will have to be the lead on that project. The reason that we can't do the landscaping pathway signage, we don't have that overarching view of what the park would look like, so we don't have the money. That's a $50,000 fee to have someone design our park for us. I don't wanna waste that kind of money doing that when we can decide ourselves. Again, that's my idea. If you have some different thoughts, I'm totally open.
Well, the one thing I was thinking of, there's a landscape architecture program at Cal Poly, there's a landscape architecture program at UC Davis. Is there any way to get, especially Cal Poly, because I mean, it's obviously more local, is there any way to get some of that work done, as part of
The beauty
the beauty?
of someone taking on that project is that is what they can do.
Okay,
I mean, I honestly feel like we are not creative enough in our thinking and our approaches to a lot of these. I mean, my goal is to not impact the CCSD as far as maintenance and cost at all. And so we're gonna have to be really creative with our projects, and that's a great idea. I also have a friend who grew up here, who is a landscape architect in Santa Barbara County, who does giant projects. He's already volunteered some of his time, so he could help someone. So there's a lot there.
yeah, I mean, I was looking at the UC Davis one, and they have it was for a project on the campus, but they had a kind of a design competition among the students for designing benches and tables and things
Oh,
like
that'd
that.
be brilliant.
And that kind of thing, obviously, is gonna be a lot less expensive if you have students doing that, plus the buy-in from students is gonna be very different than a professional, not that a professional can't do the job well. But I do think we're gonna have to be creative in how we approach this, because money's just not there, we all know that, and trying to get the money is going to be a huge challenge. Seems to me that there are some of the components that probably are less design dependent that could go in first, just volleyball court is probably not gonna have too many design elements to it. So there may be a way to show the community that something's happening even before the grand.
Well, and that being said, disc golf is fully funded.
Yes.
And we have even maintenance money, we have absolutely everything ready to go for that, so that's something that could happen. And the same thing with, if we come up with a good solid design for landscaping. If we tackled landscaping per tree, that's work party, that's donations, buy a tree. There's a lot that can happen in a grassroots effort for that, so you're absolutely right, having a student design, give us an overall view of what it would look like, and then we tackle the individual digging of the holes and all that, just.
Right.
I hope the way we can do it.
Yeah.
So.
Quesco might be a consideration as well on a smaller scale.
Mhm.
Maybe the architectural program, a director, dean of some sort could get involved and bring students in.
Yeah, I think
As
any
a
opportunity
collaboration.
for them to be dealing with a real world project as opposed to something theoretical is gonna be appealing.
You know,
I don't know if there are any.
learning experience.
Yeah.
That's what they were saying.
And then I just want to remind everybody here that I'm gonna do this a bunch. This is not a pristine meadow. This has already been, it was grazing land before, and they had a couple of cows on there and they used it to round up. It was a rodeo ground.
We'll just call it
community access.
disturbed.
And it has been great. So it is, I really want to hammer down on that. Our look and feel for the park overall is to maintain the natural environment, like even the playground, we really want it to blend. We don't want a bunch of bright colors and metal and everything like that. We really want everything we do to be a part of the environment. But this is not a natural meadow, so we're gonna bring it back. As previously, hopefully, except for. So does that sound okay to everybody?
Great.
And then, previously too, we suffered, even though everybody was gung ho and great, with people raising their hands to volunteer to take on a project. So that's why we think this board is so great, because we feel like everyone's gonna raise their hands and jump into it. That's it.
Fantastic. So given that, let's kind of think ahead, future agenda. Right, as I mentioned, there is no June 19th meeting. July 17th is 2 months away, more than 2 months away. Do we wait, or do you want to schedule okay. Yeah, so schedule a special meeting, somewhere, mid to late June. When would we want it? Just roughly, what do you, in terms of Is it better before? Or is it not dependent on the pre-app meeting? It's a little more.
It would be better to have a pre-app meeting.
You won't need a
Get a
pre-app
lot.
meeting because you have a CDP.
Yeah,
All you need to do is get final renderings of this, and we need to go to the building
right.
department with it, and that's it.
And we want to understand what's involved with each one of these components.
Yeah.
Before we, I mean, because we're gonna be assigning a DRI and then start defining our tasks for each one of these projects. And we don't know what the tasks are gonna be until we meet with the county, so.
So let's pause. Let's not try to play with dates. Let's, yeah, you'll work together
What
on.
I'd suggest is we work on conditions required, so the conditional requirements. It's only about 10 pages, so we can start there, and that's how we'll comply with the permit and get this thing built. When you had the meeting with county, did they ever say like, oh, well, we just put this in here? I'm not asking to get away from permitting or anything, but did they say, well, that's so little impact, like, why would you even bring a horseshoe pit to county to approve or anything?
That
Did you have any
They
response?
did have that response when I talked to Shani about, Shannon or Shani, I can't remember. About the disc golf, was she, you know, we looked up together online how much dirt you actually dig to
Mhm.
create a disc golf post.
A 2-inch
and-
hole, 3 foot.
Yeah,
is
exactly, and
not
she was
that
like,
much
okay, why would you, there's nothing there, so of course you can do that.
dirt.
What about the concrete platforms to launch from?
They're all above ground, and we're not really, we haven't decided whether to do it concrete or just DG,
All right.
you know, and a wood frame,
Well,
so,
their easement, you can't put concrete out there.
yeah, so. There's concrete out there though, right? Okay,
Around the bathroom.
yeah.
That's about it. That's
Some
ADA.
concrete around there.
Yeah, that's
Some
ADA.
concrete out there. Not 24 yards.
There you go.
But yeah, and of course, that's the other thing is that each one of these components, we're gonna design around the easiest way to get it done through the county. So if the county's saying no concrete, then of course, there's no concrete, we'll do DG, you know.
So that's what we need to learn. What components can we go ahead with without any other permitting? Because it's all good. And, so.
Of course, I know the playground's it's gonna be a construction permit,
Oh, yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the only thing I see is that might be in the flood zone. They might not permit that in the flood zone. So there's some things we might have to move some features around, reorientation a little bit. but-
Yeah, and that's another thing I wanted to point out is that we put things on our map, you know, aside from the parking lot and the dog park. That are, it's fluid, you know, it's a general location. And to your point exactly, the playground might need to come in a little bit. And there's plenty of space to move those things around, but that's kind of where they're gonna live.
Well, great to have you engaged in this. That's amazing. Thank you.
So Jim, does this document line up with?
So that top portion of there,
Yeah.
for those features where there's concrete or excavation or any dirt movement, we'll have to respond to those with some accurate figures.
Can we, I mean, obviously it's a longer discussion, but can we sit down and talk to you about each one of these
Yeah.
requirements that we make sure that we provide them what they want? And then, because this is hopefully more of a conversational meeting, you know, if we show up with our map, is that gonna be enough, or I wanna get.
Yeah, let's discuss it. Yeah. I mean, I have some expectations just because this will be like the 8th CDP or meeting I've gone through with them. So there's some things that I'd like to see because I already know what they're gonna ask for.
Okay,
So if we have that information handy and readily available and already vetted, then that'd be fantastic. That's great.
So next steps, the two of you meeting with Mr. Green, I see Mr. Johnson's online, he's been on the meeting.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, it'll be with the utilities.
So I'll poll the group for some tentative dates, but we won't set the next meeting, the special meeting, until you learn more. And you'll coach me, you'll advise me on when the timing is good. All
and I
right,
have travel coming up too, so.
yeah. So anything else, any public input on future agenda items? Then, okay, we're just under the wire. It's 4:00 PM and this meeting of the first committee is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
He includes
your
that.
email was perfect when you said.
It's 120 pages. We should probably get
So,
well versed in that.
Yeah.
We're already-
Well, the schedule
We just gotta
with
get
Jim
the
and-
building from Mark.